Indigenous Rights Radio, because knowledge is power.
You are now listening to Cultural Survival's Global News Bulletin. Every month, Cultural Survival brings you the latest news impacting indigenous peoples across the globe. This July edition features important stories from Europe, North, Central and South America, Africa, Asia and beyond. Starting news from UN level. The UNESCO has appointed two indigenous researchers, Dr. Amy Parent from Canada and Dr. Sonazaria Minch from India as co-chairs of a new initiative aimed at protecting indigenous languages and knowledge amid this climate crisis. This crucial development acknowledges the profound link between indigenous languages like the Niska word Axme, meaning tweed berries, and generations of invaluable climate knowledge and cultural practices. While the article focuses on global efforts, Australia, with its rich and diverse indigenous cultures, stands to benefit immensely from such an initiative, as the preservation and revitalization of indigenous languages are vital for maintaining traditional ecological knowledge and fostering climate resilience within its own communities. In USA, tribal governments, Pueblo leaders and conservation organizations are intensifying calls for federal officials to maintain vital protections around Chaco Canyon, a UNESCO World Heritage Site of immense cultural and spiritual significance. Efforts are underway to reverse a Trump-era move that challenged a Biden administration policy banning new oil and gas development within 10 miles of the historic site for 2 decades. The National Congress of American Indians recently passed a resolution advocating for permanent legislative protections and a comprehensive study by the Interior Department conducted in consultation with tribal nations. Opponents argue that preserving this ancestral homeland, once home to a magnificent civilization, far outright short-term energy profits, emphasizing the years of collaborative efforts and tribal consultation invested in establishing the buffer zone. In Canada, new legislation that fast-tracks infrastructure and energy projects in British Columbia is drawing strong criticism from First Nations and environmental groups who are concerned about environmental impacts and infringements on Indigenous rights. Despite significant pushback, 3 controversial bills, BC's Bill 14, Bill 15, and Federal Bill C-5 have become law. Critics, including lawyers, Hug Breaker of the First Nations Summit, predict legal challenges, arguing that the bill allows projects to bypass crucial federal laws and proceed without adequate consultation or consent from Indigenous communities. First Nation leaders emphasize their right to free, prior, and informed consent, citing established legal precedents, and express dismay over the hurried legislative process and insufficient engagement. In Australia, in a landmark move, the United Nations Global Environmental Outlook 7 report now formally recognizes the crucial role of Indigenous leadership and knowledge in global environmental governance. Co-authored by Noongar writer J.C. Philley, the report includes a dedicated chapter, Indigenous and Local Knowledge and the Statement of Indigenous Peoples 2025. This significant inclusion, an institutional first for the UN, asserts that the indigenous knowledge is essential for achieving global sustainability. Notably, the report internationally endorses the Uluru Statement from the Herd and its vision for the Makarrata Commissions, amplifying the voices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people on the world stage and the setting up a precedent for co-determined environmental futures. Now news from Africa. In South Africa, The Ministry of Sport, Arts and Culture has announced two major initiatives aimed at addressing historical injustices: the reburial of Khoi and San ancestral human remains and the next phase of the exile repatriation projects. The first project involves a reburial of 58 ancestral remains from the Northern Cape, which were previously kept in museums and research institutions without consent. These remains belong to indigenous groups such as the Khoi, San, Nama, Greek, and Korana. The reburial process is being coordinated by the Northern Cape Reburial Task Team in collaborations with the Iziko Museums and SARA, and guided by cultural and spiritual practices. Negotiations are also underway with the University of Glasgow's Hunterian Museum to return more remains to South Africa. The second initiative seeks to locate and repatriate the remains of South Africans who died in exile during the liberation struggle. Building on a 2021 national policy, the Exile Repatriation Project aims to bring home those buried in unmarked graves abroad. A technical mission will soon visit Angola, Lesotho, Zambia, and Zimbabwe to investigate cemetery records and conduct historical research. The public is being urged to assist by providing information that could help identify the deceased. These initiatives are part of the ministry's broader effort to restore dignity, honor ancestral memory, and promote national healing. In Namibia commemorated the inaugural Genocide Remembrance Day recently, marking the first formal memorial for the massacre of the tens of thousands of Herero and Nama people under German colonial rule from 1904 to 1908. The ceremony, held in Windhoek Parliament Gardens, featured a candlelight vigil and speeches by President Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah and Vice President Lucia Witbooi, attended by around 1,000 participants, including community descendants and the German ambassador. In Kenya, UNESCO has recently highlighted an indigenous-led radio station in Kenya through writing an article on its website. Bush Radio, launched in Kajiado County in 2017 under UNESCO's multi-donor program for freedom of expression, is a grassroots community station broadcasting in Ma, Swahili, and other languages to elevate indigenous voices. It trains local journalists in ICT and journalism, ensuring culturally relevant, accurate content that addresses critical issues like land rights, health, and education. With interactive features like live SMS feedback, women's listening groups, and community forums, Bush Radio empowers elders, youth, and marginalized groups to participate in shaping editorial content. By promoting media pluralism, fostering civic engagement, and amplifying indigenous perspectives, it plays a vital role in strengthening democratic participation at the local level in Kenya. Now, news from Asia. In Bangladesh, the Global Association for Indigenous Peoples of the Chittagong Hill Tracts has urgently called on the EU ambassador in Dhaka to intervene following extensive Bangladesh army operations across 68 villages in the Chittagong Hill Tracts since June 19. The Global Association for Indigenous Peoples of Chittagong Hill Tracts alleges these operations are part of the interim government's strategy to support Rohingya armed groups, leading to intensified recruitment efforts by these groups in the Chittagong Hill Tracts, particularly in Bandarban. Reports indicate at least 23 indigenous individuals have been arrested, 2 schools occupied, and a 14-year-old girl allegedly tied and interrogated during a home raid. The Global Association for Indigenous Peoples of Chittagong Hill Tracts demands an immediate end to the operations, accountability for abuses, and protection for indigenous peoples from further victimization. In Thailand, a new royal decree in Thailand enacted in November 2024 is sparking urgent concerns at the 91st session of the UN Committee on Elimination of Discrimination Against Women in Geneva. Despite Thailand's recent report to CEDAW highlighting progress, indigenous women's advocates warn the decree severely undermines their land rights and livelihoods. The law affects over 4,000 communities, imposing non-transferable 20-year land permits and restricting traditional farming, directly contradicting Thailand's constitution and international commitments like CEDAW's General Recommendation number 39. This jeopardizes economic security, cultural preservation, and the human dignity of thousands of indigenous women and their families, prompting calls for immediate review and amendment of the decree. In India, indigenous communities across northeast India are at the forefront of combating climate change, leveraging ancestral knowledge to implement highly effective and sustainable environmental practices. Tribes such as the Khasi, Garo, Apatani, Missing, Nasi, and Bodo demonstrate remarkable resilience and ecological wisdom. The Khasi protect sacred groves, acting as significant carbon sinks, while the Garo adopt shifting cultivations with nitrogen-fixing crops. The Apatani employ a unique form of wet rice cultivation that incorporates integrated fish farming, while the Mishing construct flood-resilient silt homes. The Nasi manage community forests, which are crucial for biodiversity and carbon sequestration, and the Bodo utilize bamboo for sustainable housing and riverbank stabilization. These practices offer vital lessons for global climate policy, proving that traditional methods can provide innovative solutions to contemporary environmental challenges. Now, news from Latin America. In Peru, Lima, Peru recently hosted the 15th International Festival of Indigenous Peoples Films and Communication from June 20 to 28. Under the theme Voices and Images of Our Mother Earth, the festival showcased over 50 films from 12 countries, including Argentina, Canada, Mexico, and Norway. Organized by the Coordinadora Latinoamericana de Cine y Comunicación de los Pueblos Indígenas since 1985, the event continued its nearly 40-year tradition of promoting indigenous cinemas and fostering cultural reflection. The festival celebrated the works of renowned indigenous filmmakers including Zazarias Kunuk Inuit, Graciela Gureni-Cuiwa, and Sandine Tome and the Navajo, underscoring the vital role of indigenous cinema in preserving memory, identity, and resistance. In Bolivia, 3 years after devastating forest fires, the Ayorio indigenous community of Tiuna continues to face extreme precarity, living in makeshift tents outside Choti, Santa Cruz. The 2022 blazes obliterated their homes, crops, and the animals, forcing their displacement. They now reside in impoverished shelters on a former landfill, lacking access to drinking water and electricity, and battling health crises like tuberculosis. Their plight, recently highlighted by the award-winning documentary Después de una Incendio, underscores a larger environmental and humanitarian crisis. Bolivia, ranking second in Latin America for annual forest loss, sees extensive fires driven by agricultural expansion. Despite minimal agricultural conversion in their territory, Tiuna was severely impacted. The community's involuntary displacement exemplifies the ongoing violation of indigenous land rights in eastern Bolivia, leaving them silent victims of institutional neglect and discrimination. In Brazil, as COP30 approaches, Brazil faces scrutiny over its dual role as a climate leader and an aspiring oil power. indigenous leaders across the 9 Amazonian nations have sharply condemned the Brazilian government's recent auction of 19 oil exploration blocks near the mouth of the Amazon River, warning of severe environmental and territorial devastation. In a pivotal pre-COP indigenous summit held in Brasilia last June, representatives proposed urgent climate solutions. Key demands included the legal recognitions and protection of indigenous lands as exploitation-free zones, direct financial support for adaptation and mitigation efforts, and a comprehensive involvement of indigenous peoples in climate policy decisions. Their unified message highlights the urgent need to protect indigenous territories for effective climate action. In Colombia, a coalition of rural, indigenous, and environmental organizations in Colombia has introduced a bill to safeguard native seeds by prohibiting the use, importation, and commercialization of genetically modified seeds nationwide. This initiative seeks to amend Article 81 of Constitution, while Colombia has adopted agricultural biotechnology with over 1 million hectares of genetically modified crops planted between 2003 and 2020, generating substantial revenue. Rural communities question who the actual beneficiaries are. The local organization asserted that the Colombian Agricultural Institute has prioritized agribusiness over the rights of farmers and indigenous peoples, neglecting proper consultation regarding decisions directly impacting their territories and farming practices. This movement highlights the ongoing struggle to preserve traditional agricultural practices and biodiversity. In Ecuador, Ecuador's Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities and the National Anti-Mining Front have condemned violent police repression against communities resisting the Puripamba El Demo mining projects in Las Naves, Bolivia. On June 24, hundreds of police reportedly entered the La Union precinct, injuring several residents while attempting to clear a passage for mining machinery. Protesters have resisted the Kuri Mining SA project for over a month, defending their water, land, and livelihoods. Ecuador's Confederation of Indigenous Nationalities asserts the government is complicit with the mining company, aiming to silence legitimate dissent. They hold the national government responsible for the aggression, demanding an immediate halt to such actions. Neither the police nor the Interior Ministry has commented. In Guatemala, over 250 delegates from 30 territories convened at the 4th Plurinational Summit for Water Freedom, urgently demanding a new water law crafted directly by communities. Indigenous authorities, spiritual guides, and community leaders united, asserting water as a living entity and a shared resource, not a commodity. The summit arose amidst escalating threats to Guatemala's water sources from extractive industries, monocultures, hydroelectric projects, and unchecked urbanization. Participants stressed that any legislation must reflect ancestral knowledge, collective rights, and community best practices, rejecting decisions made by technical elites or business interests. This powerful gathering underscores the urgent need for a transparent and participatory process to protect this vital element. In Panama, Dr. Albert Barume, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples, concluded a critical academic visit to Panama from June 19 to 22, invited by the International Indian Treaty Council and the CONA General Congress. Dr. Barume investigated in situ human rights abuses against indigenous communities. His visit focused on alleged violations stemming from the Panamanian government's repression of peaceful protests against mining projects on indigenous lands. During his time in the country, the Special Rapporteur met with the government authorities as well as indigenous leaders, families, and community members. Upon concluding his visit, Dr. Barume expressed deep concern, stating, quote, "I deeply regret what has happened here. It is not fair. It is a clear violation of international law that should not have occurred, unquote. His findings highlight significant breaches of international law concerning indigenous peoples' rights. That is all for this edition of Cultural Survival's Global News Bulletin. Stay tuned for our next broadcast. For more information on the rights of indigenous peoples, visit ces.org and follow Cultural Survival on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Threads, and Blue Sky.